Why are people still searching for the Ark? The wind never stops here. It scourges the jagged limestone of Mount Sinai, stripping away loose grit and carving deep, jagged fissures into the living rock. High above the desert floor, the air thins, turning sharp and cold even under the relentless glare of the sun. There is no vegetation. No movement save for the shifting of fine, gray dust across the plateaus. The peaks rise in layers of calcified stone, a fortress of geology that has stood for millennia in absolute isolation. This is a landscape stripped to its core, indifferent to the passage of time or the ambitions of men. Below, the vast expanse of the wilderness stretches toward the horizon, a sea of brown and gold, broken only by the shadows of passing clouds. The silence is absolute, heavy with the weight of an unseen history. Every ridge and ravine seems to hold its breath. Here, at the summit, the world of the living falls away, leaving only the raw, ancient surface of the earth. The mountain waits. It has seen the turning of ages, yet it remains unchanged, a silent monument to a moment that shifted the course of human history. The sky above the summit changes without warning. A thick, opaque vapor bleeds into the atmosphere, spiraling downward until it coils around the jagged peaks like a living shroud. The ambient light dies, replaced by a gray, pressurized stillness that muffles the sound of the wind. Moses begins the final climb. He moves slowly, boots grating against the loose scree, his breathing rhythmic and sharp. Each step takes him deeper into the swirling density. The air here feels heavy, vibrating with an unseen frequency that makes the very stone beneath his feet tremble. He pauses, his hand reaching out to touch the threshold of the mist. It does not behave like fog. It resists, thick and textured like static. He pushes forward, his silhouette fading into the gray wall of the cloud as he disappears from the mountain ridge. The world outside the mist ceases to exist for him. There is only the silence of the void and the encroaching pressure of the divine. He is no longer walking on earth, but stepping into the heart of an ancient, overwhelming mystery. The summit is gone, swallowed by the cloud, leaving the mountain in total, expectant darkness. Inside the stillness, the experience transcends the visual. The book of Exodus preserves the encounter not as a memory, but as a blueprint. The text anchors the ethereal moment in the rigid, uncompromising language of physical law. It dictates the dimensions of a sacred chest with mathematical precision, stripping away ambiguity. 3 cubits in length, 2 in breadth, 2 in height. These are not suggestions. They are the parameters of a vessel designed to contain the weight of a covenant. The narration details the material requirements. Acacia wood, durable and resistant to the desert heat, overlaid with gold that reflects the light of the sanctuary. The scripture defines the architecture of the cherubim, their wings spread, their faces turned inward toward the mercy seat. This is the divine pattern, translated from the silence of the mountain into the clarity of human record. By documenting these measurements, the text provides the craftsman with a singular purpose. It transforms a fleeting vision into a tangible goal. The instructions remain fixed, a bridge between the unseen power of the summit and the work that must now follow in the valley below. The word becomes the plan, and the plan becomes the law. The focus shifts from the written word to the valley floor. Deep within a shadowed structure, the air is thick with the scent of pine resin and the sharp, metallic tang of an active forge. This is the workshop of Bezalel. The silence of the mountain is replaced by a relentless, rhythmic cadence. The steady strike of hammers against gold plates rings out, echoing against the stone walls. Craftsmen move with calculated efficiency, their focus entirely on the raw materials spread across heavy wooden benches. There is no trace of the ethereal here. No light radiates from the walls. Only the orange glow of the furnace illuminates the workspace. Acacia timber, dense and dark, is sorted and measured against the strict requirements of the blueprint. Every chisel strike is deliberate, intended to shape the wood to the exact specifications recorded in the text. The heat from the forge is oppressive, yet the work continues without pause. Hands move with practiced speed, turning rough logs into structural components. The atmosphere is grounded, defined by the physical resistance of metal and wood. This is a place of labor, where the divine pattern is methodically translated into the physical world, one precise cut at a time. The transition from vision to creation is complete, and the construction of the vessel has begun in earnest. The acacia wood lies heavy on the workbench, its surface coarse and unforgiving. It is a dense, desert-hardened timber, resistant to the blade and demanding of the hand. The craftsmen approach the blocks with a focused, singular intensity. Each movement is a test of endurance. A chisel bites into the grain, shavings curling away in thin, dry ribbons. The wood resists, forcing the worker to lean his entire weight into the strike, knuckles whitening under the strain. There is no room for error in the assembly. The dimensions must be exact to hold the weight of the covenant. A carpenter runs a thumb along a finished edge, testing the smoothness against the blueprint. The wood is joined with precision, dowels tapped into place with steady, rhythmic strikes. The sound is dull and solid, a resonant thud that vibrates through the floor. Sweat beads on foreheads, dripping onto the dusty stone, but the pace does not slacken. The responsibility of the task is etched into the way they handle the materials, moving them as if they held the weight of a nation. As the frame of the chest emerges, the wood takes on a new form, transitioning from raw timber to a structured, purposeful vessel. The foundation is set, and the physical reality of the construction begins to mirror the complexity of the original design. The focus shifts to the forge, where the air shimmers with intense heat. Raw gold, dull and irregular, is tossed into the crucible. As it melts, the color deepens, turning into a molten stream that glows with a fierce, blinding intensity. Bezalel stands before the anvil, his breathing steady despite the ambient temperature. He pulls a glowing ingot from the fire with long iron tongs, placing it onto the steel surface. The first strike of the hammer is heavy, sending a shower of sparks flying into the dim room. Each subsequent blow is faster, rhythmic, and calculated. The gold flattens, spreading outward under the pressure, losing its jagged edges as it is beaten into thin, uniform sheets. The sound is a sharp, metallic ringing that punctuates the heavy silence of the workshop. Once the metal cools, the craftsmen move with surgical care, trimming the sheets to match the dimensions of the wooden box. They apply the gold to the acacia frame, folding the edges over with flat-headed tools to ensure a seamless bond. The rhythmic clanging continues, a steady metronome of labor that bridges the gap between raw material and sacred object. The surface of the box is no longer wood. It is becoming a reflective, gilded shell, mirroring the orange light of the furnace in every facet. The workshop remains thick with the smell of charcoal and hot metal. The craftsmen work in shifts, their movements deliberate and devoid of haste. There is no flicker of supernatural light, only the steady, orange glow of the embers reflecting off the gilded surface. One laborer wipes his brow with a forearm, leaving a smear of soot across his skin. He reaches for a set of bronze calipers, checking the distance between the corners of the box. He adjusts his grip, taps a joint with a wooden mallet until it seats perfectly flush, then nods to his partner. They move with the efficiency of men who have performed this task 1,000 times. Every seam is scrutinized, every rivet hammered until it sits level with the surrounding gold. The box is heavy, a dense, solid mass of timber and metal that requires 2 men to shift across the workspace. They do not pause to admire the result. They move immediately to polish the surface, rubbing away the oxidation with rough cloth. The object stands before them, a product of sweat, calloused hands, and strict adherence to the provided dimensions. It is a functional vessel, grounded entirely in the reality of the desert forge. The silence in the room returns, broken only by the settling of the cooling coals and the rhythmic, heavy breathing of the workers. The focus turns to the lid, the final piece of the construction. 2 golden figures are cast separately in clay molds, their forms emerging from the cooled metal with wings extended and heads bowed. Bezalel inspects the castings, filing away excess material until the surfaces are smooth and uniform. He positions the first figure on the edge of the heavy gold plate, marking the exact points for the pins. He drills with a fine-tipped tool, the metal shavings curling away like dust. Then, the second figure is set opposite the first. They are positioned to face one another, wings curving upward toward the center. The craftsmen use small, specialized hammers to drive the golden pins, ensuring the connection is rigid and permanent. Every tap is controlled, calculated to secure the figures without distorting the intricate detail of the wings. Once fixed, the 2 figures stand as a singular, unified element atop the box. The final polish is applied with soft leather, removing every fingerprint and smudge. The object is complete. It sits in the center of the workspace, a rectangular vessel topped by the gilded figures, reflecting the dim light of the workshop. The work is finished, and for the first time, the heavy tension of the labor gives way to a quiet, profound stillness in the room. The workshop doors are thrown open, revealing the harsh, blinding light of the desert noon. A group of Levites enters, their faces set with a singular purpose. They approach the finished vessel, moving with practiced, rhythmic steps. Two long poles of acacia wood are slid through the gold rings, mounted on the sides of the ark. The wood groans under the sudden shift in weight as the men stoop to take their positions. They do not rush. Each man plants his feet firmly in the sand, gripping the polished wood until his knuckles turn white. On a silent signal, they heave upward. The ark lifts from the workbench, swaying slightly before it settles into a balanced, steady hover above the ground. The metal rings clink softly against the poles, a rhythmic, metallic sound that cuts through the wind. They turn toward the camp perimeter, taking the first slow, deliberate steps into the open terrain. The workshop falls behind them, a dark, cooling shadow in the vast expanse of the desert. The journey has begun. Every step is measured to ensure the vessel remains level, the weight pressing deep into the shoulders of the men. They move as one body, leaving the stability of the forge for the uncertainty of the shifting dunes ahead. The horizon stretches indefinitely, a sea of undulating sand under a relentless sun. The procession cuts a slow, dark line through the vastness. Heat waves ripple off the ground, distorting the path ahead. The Levites keep their pace fixed, their eyes locked on the dunes, adjusting their stride to compensate for the shifting terrain beneath their boots. Then, the air changes. A low hum builds in the distance, growing into a harsh, scouring roar. A wall of wind-driven sand descends, erasing the horizon and turning the world into a blur of brown and gray. The men hunch forward, shielding the vessel with their bodies. The weight of the ark suddenly pulls harder against the gusts, threatening to tilt the poles. A Levite stumbles, his boot burying deep into a soft drift. He recovers his balance, digging his heels into the firmer ground beneath the loose surface. They huddle, bracing against the force, waiting for the peak of the squall to pass. As the wind dies down to a steady, biting breeze, they resume their movement, boots crunching against the grit. The ark remains level, held aloft by the collective strain of the group. They press on, a small, enduring cluster of movement in a landscape that refuses to yield. The landscape shifts. Gone is the dry, abrasive dust of the dunes, replaced by the damp scent of reeds and the roar of rushing water. The Jordan River stands before them, a churning barrier of slate-gray torrents swollen by the spring rains. The procession comes to a sudden, jagged halt on the bank. The current is violent, tearing at the muddy edges of the shore, making the crossing appear impossible. The Levites anchor their feet, the weight of the ark pulling them toward the slope. A silence falls over the group, save for the thunder of the river. The lead priests look at the water, then at the golden vessel. They take a single, deliberate step. The mud gives way under their weight, but they do not falter. As their feet touch the surface of the river, the water does not rise to meet them. Instead, the roar begins to fade into a hollow, rushing sound as the riverbed upstream begins to dry. The water piles up on the horizon, a wall of liquid held back by an unseen force. The path across the silt-heavy floor reveals itself, glistening and firm. They step down from the bank and onto the exposed earth. The ark remains perfectly balanced, moving steadily into the center of the dry channel, leaving the raging water to churn harmlessly behind them. The journey concludes in the shadow of a sprawling tent structure. The harsh, blinding glare of the desert sun is replaced by the muted, dim atmosphere of the tabernacle. The Levites move with measured, rhythmic steps, their boots sinking into the packed earth as they pass through the outer courtyard. Every movement is deliberate, stripped of the frantic urgency of the trek. They lift the poles, guiding the ark through the threshold of the primary enclosure. The air inside is heavy, still, and scented with the lingering smoke of incense. A thick woven veil hangs before them, blocking the view of the inner sanctum. The priests pause, the weight of the golden vessel shifting slightly as they come to a complete stop. With a synchronized motion, they push past the heavy fabric. The light here is amber and stagnant. They set the ark down upon the prepared base, the metallic base clicking against the stone floor. The veil drops back into place, sealing the space behind them. Outside, the camp continues its daily cycle, but inside, the silence is absolute. The vessel rests. The era of constant movement ends, replaced by a settled, enduring stillness that defines the heart of the sanctuary. Time moved forward, measured in generations rather than days. The portable sanctuary of the desert was replaced by the limestone permanence of Jerusalem. A massive stone structure rose upon the hill, a testament to a settled kingdom. The ark was no longer a traveler. It was an anchor, A procession wound its way through the city gates, ascending the slope toward the newly finished gates of the temple. The Levites walked on paved stone instead of shifting sand. The air here was clear, free of the grit that had defined their former path. They carried the golden vessel through the outer courts, where the sound of their footsteps echoed against polished marble walls. The scale of the architecture dwarfed the procession, emphasizing the transition from a nomadic past to a rooted, sovereign present. They reached the entrance of the inner sanctum, where the scent of cedar replaced the smell of desert scrub. The transition was absolute. As they moved into the interior, the sunlight vanished, replaced by the soft, reflected glow of the chamber. They set the ark down, the metal grounding firmly into the foundation. The nation had reached its height, and the vessel was finally at rest within the heart of the capital. The structure stood solid, a monument to a new era of stability. Inside the Holy of Holies, the atmosphere was defined by the scent of aged cedar and the muted reflection of gold. The ark occupied the center, resting on the foundation stone. It was a space designed for total exclusion, where the outside world ceased to exist. Yet, the very thickness of the walls and the weight of the doors created a strange, unintended isolation. Outside these walls, the kingdom had expanded, drawing eyes and ambitions from distant lands. The silence within the chamber was no longer just a byproduct of reverence. It began to feel like a vacuum. Every flicker of the oil lamps cast long, shifting shadows across the gold surfaces, suggesting movement where there was none. The structure was undeniably grand, a pinnacle of craftsmanship that commanded respect, but the scale of the achievement also drew a target. The stability felt brittle. While the interior remained locked in its ritual cycle, the political horizon outside was changing. Reports reached the city of shifting alliances and encroaching forces. The opulence of the sanctuary, once a source of absolute security, now stood as a silent witness to a kingdom nearing the limits of its endurance. The air grew thin. The stillness held, but it was the stillness of a structure waiting for a change that it could no longer hold back. The horizon darkened long before the sun set. Reports arrived in short, frantic bursts. Border outposts overrun, trade routes severed, the northern defenses shattered. The city walls, once considered impenetrable, suddenly felt like thin barriers against an inevitable tide. In the streets of Jerusalem, the rhythm of daily life disintegrated. Merchants shuttered their stalls, and the steady flow of people turned into a panicked surge toward the inner gates. The temple, previously a sanctuary of absolute silence, became a focal point for the mounting anxiety. Priests moved with hurried, uneven steps, their voices barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd outside. Then came the sound that silenced all others, a low, rhythmic thudding from the distant plains. It was not thunder, it was the mechanical heartbeat of the Babylonian war machine. The vibration traveled through the limestone foundations, felt in the soles of feet, and the palms pressed against the cold altar stone. Every lamp in the Holy of Holies flickered as the ground trembled. The shadow of the siege had finally arrived, stretching across the city and into the very heart of the sanctuary. The security of the golden walls was gone. The threat was no longer a rumor on the wind. It was a physical weight pressing against the gates of the kingdom. The first stone hit the outer rampart with a sound like a mountain splintering. The impact sent a shockwave through the city, rattling the heavy bronze doors of the temple until they groaned on their hinges. Outside, the sky was choked with the dust of falling masonry and the smoke of burning timber. Inside the Holy of Holies, the priests fell to their knees, their chants failing as the rhythmic assault intensified. Every strike of the massive rams shook the floor, causing the golden vessels to slide across the stone pedestal. A ceiling beam cracked overhead, showering the chamber in mortar and dust. The air turned thick, metallic with the scent of pulverized rock and fire. There was no longer a distinction between the sacred space and the world outside. The chaos had bridged the gap. Men screamed in the courtyards as the perimeter wall finally gave way. The ground heaved under the weight of the encroaching forces. The priests scrambled to shield the ark, but their movements were frantic, uncoordinated, and desperate. Above, the roof of the temple shuddered as a massive projectile struck the masonry just inches from the inner sanctuary. The world was fracturing, and the last line of defense was buckling under the relentless, crushing momentum of the Babylonian advance. The final blow did not shatter the remaining walls with a roar. Instead, it tore through the structural heart of the temple with a sickening, grinding scream of stone against stone. Then, the sound died. The relentless thudding of the siege engines ceased. The cries of the defenders vanished into a vacuum. A suffocating stillness settled over the Holy of Holies.
heavier than the noise that preceded it.
Dust motes hung suspended in the stagnant air, illuminated by a single shaft of light piercing the fractured roof. The heavy veil,
once a barrier of sanctity, now hung in scorched, tattered ribbons. Across the floor, debris lay in piles.
Yet the air held a terrifying lack of motion. The priests stood motionless, their hands frozen mid-gesture, eyes fixed on the empty space where the sanctuary had once stood inviolate. The breach had occurred, the sacred boundary was crossed, and the world outside had finally poured in. There was no defiance left, only the ringing in the ears of those who witnessed the end of an era. The silence was absolute, a profound, hollow void that signaled the absolute surrender of the temple to the encroaching darkness. The city was taken.
The heartbeat of the sanctuary had been extinguished in a single, breathless moment of finality. The silence did not break. It deepened, turning into a heavy, suffocating weight that filled the chamber. Survivors moved through the wreckage with trembling hands, their fingers brushing against cold, shattered stone.
They approached the pedestal in the Holy of Holies, expecting the weight of the past to remain, but their hands met only empty space.
The wood was gone. The gold was gone. The cherubim that had watched over the sanctuary for generations had vanished into the smoke and shadow.
A commander stepped forward, torch held high, scanning the debris for a glint of metal or a splinter of timber, but the floor remained barren. There were no signs of looting.
No broken fragments, only the haunting vacancy of the site. The record of the kings ended there.
The scribes who chronicled the fall of the city left their quills dry, for there was nothing left to describe.
The object that had anchored their identity had simply ceased to be part of the physical world. Men stood in the ruins, looking at the scorched floor, unable to reconcile the reality of the loss. The space where the manifestation of the divine had rested was now just another patch of dust. The history of the kingdom had reached its final, unresolved page, and the ark had slipped into the dark, leaving behind a silence that would outlast the city itself.
Far to the north, the horizon began to bleed dust. It was not a storm, but the rhythmic, synchronized march of an empire. The Assyrian legions moved with a precision that turned the rugged terrain into a mere path for their expansion. Scouts rode at the vanguard, their horses kicking up long plumes of dry earth that drifted over the hills like a shroud. The northern tribes watched from the high ridges, seeing the glint of iron and the disciplined geometry of the advancing ranks. There was no hesitation in the Assyrian advance. They crossed rivers without slowing, built bridges of timber and stone in hours, and systematically dismantled the defenses of every hamlet that dared to stand in their way. The ground trembled under the weight of thousands of boots, a constant, low-frequency hum that signaled the end of autonomy. Villages were not merely taken, they were erased from the map. The Assyrian commanders directed the flow of their forces with signals of bronze and fire, cutting off escape routes with clinical accuracy. Every valley, every pass, and every mountain road became a theater for their brutal efficiency. The tribes of the north stood exposed as the shadow of the empire stretched across their lands, a relentless tide that had already claimed the plains and was now tightening its grip on the heart of the kingdom.
The year 722 BC marked the final fracture. With the northern fortresses dismantled,
the Assyrian administration commenced the systematic removal of the population. Scribes stood at the gates of every city, recording names on clay as families were forced into the open fields. There was no negotiation. Guards pushed the populace into long, winding columns that stretched for miles across the arid plains.
They took only what they could carry on their backs, leaving behind the hearths, the fields, and the ancestral boundaries that had defined their existence for centuries.
The process was cold and bureaucratic. Entire lineages were uprooted in a single season. As the columns moved southward, the landscape began to change, and the familiar landmarks of the north faded into the distance. This was not a migration. It was a state-mandated scattering. By the time the dust settled on the abandoned villages, the demographic map of the region had been permanently altered. The 10 tribes were being dispersed to the corners of the empire,
their shared identity severed from the geography that had nurtured it. With every mile traveled away from their home, the possibility of return diminished,
leaving behind only an empty land and the silence of a nation that had been forcibly unmade. The truth of the displacement rests in the archives of the conquerors. Centuries after the silence fell over the northern plains, researchers unearthed the evidence in the form of heavy, sun-dried clay. A gloved hand lifts a tablet from a layer of compacted silt. The surface is covered in precise, wedge-shaped indentations, cuneiform script that has survived 3 millennia. These are not stories, but inventories. They list the exact counts of people moved, the regions they were assigned to, and the administrative tax levied against the captured territories. Each stroke of the stylus serves as a ledger of human lives uprooted. The experts align these records with the archaeological strata found in the excavation pits. They measure the depth of the debris, identifying the precise moment when the local material culture vanishes and is replaced by the standardized, alien artifacts of the Assyrian state. There is no ambiguity in the data. The tablets confirm the scale of the forced migration, providing a clinical, mathematical breakdown of the scattering. As the light hits the ridges of the clay, the ancient marks reveal the cold mechanics of a nation's dissolution, anchoring the biblical tragedy to the undeniable, physical proof of the record. The trade routes that once pulsed with the wealth of empires now served as the path of the dispossessed. Thousands of feet kicked up a continuous, choking cloud of dust that hung in the stagnant desert air.
The march was relentless. Every few hundred yards, a straggler would stumble, knees hitting the gravel with a dull thud, only to be spurred upright by the blunt end of a spear. The guards pushed the pace,
ensuring the column never broke its rhythm. One group, a family of 4, moved near the edge of the line.
Their movements were heavy, mechanical, and stripped of grace. They clung to small bundles of belongings,
hands white-knuckled against the fabric as they navigated the uneven, sun-scorched terrain. The heat radiated from the rock, blurring the horizon into a shimmer of orange and brown. There was no water, no shade,
and no reprieve from the constant forward momentum. As they passed beneath the shadow of a limestone ridge,
the line stretched thin, disappearing into the vast, unforgiving landscape. They were no longer citizens of a kingdom,
but figures in a ledger, walking away from their history toward an unknown destination that would never feel like home again.
The desert wind erased their tracks almost as quickly as they were made. History is a battlefield where evidence and imagination collide. For every tablet that records the reality of the exile, there are a dozen theories that attempt to fill the silence with legend. We see a modern office filled with stacks of paper maps claiming hidden routes, manuscripts proposing secret migrations, and journals claiming the location of lost treasures. A researcher takes a heavy volume of speculative theory, flips through its unverified claims, and sets it aside with a sharp, final thud. He clears the table, leaving only the hard data, the carbon-dated shards and the verified cuneiform logs. The distinction is brutal. Where myth paints a picture of a grand, hidden empire, the evidence shows a scattered, struggling population assimilated into the landscape of their conquerors. The audience is forced to confront the gap between what they want to believe and what the earth actually reveals. We must cut through the layers of romanticized fiction to reach the core of the historical record. The search for truth requires discarding the convenient stories that comfort us in favor of the uncomfortable, fragmented reality left behind in the dirt. It is a transition from the allure of the mystery to the cold discipline of the historian. The truth of the past is buried under centuries of sediment. We descend into the excavation pit where the earth is carved into precise, vertical slices. Each layer of dirt represents a chapter of time, a physical record of collapse and displacement. A worker kneels on a wooden plank, carefully scraping away a thin layer of compacted silt with a steel trowel. The metallic rasp against stone is the only sound in the trench. He pauses, his brush clearing a patch of blackened, carbonized debris. This is the layer of the siege. It is not an abstract theory, but a physical boundary line etched in ash and fire-scarred limestone. Every grain of sand lifted from the site is a piece of the puzzle that confirms the historical displacement. As the dig continues, the physical motion of the spade mirrors the narrative search for a lost foundation. The researcher sifts through the rubble, discarding modern debris to isolate the ancient strata. A small pottery shard emerges from the dust, its rim worn smooth by time. It is a fragment of a life interrupted. The deeper we dig, the more the myth recedes, revealing the hard, silent evidence of a civilization caught in the machinery of conquest. The excavation is a slow, methodical reconstruction of a history that was meant to be buried forever. The search for the vessels of the temple is a pursuit that defies the boundaries of academic inquiry.
In the dim subterranean tunnels, the air is thick with the scent of stagnant stone and ancient dust.
A lead researcher moves his lamp along the cavern wall, the light catching the uneven texture of limestone. He stops. The beam illuminates a series of deliberate, man-made notches hidden behind a layer of loose silt. He signals his team. They move in with surgical precision, using thin dental picks to clear the cracks. This is not just about mapping the strata anymore. It is a hunt for the artifacts that once anchored a nation. The intensity is palpable. Every motion is deliberate, every breath held, as they probe the structural anomaly. They are looking for the gold, the incense burners,
the sacred implements that vanished in the smoke of the Babylonian siege.
This desire to touch the past, to hold the vessels that once stood in the Holy of Holies, drives them through the heat and the darkness. It is an obsession born from the need to bridge the chasm between history and myth. They are not merely digging for metal. They are digging for a tangible connection to a foundational power that has haunted the human imagination for millennia. The focus shifts from the claustrophobic tunnels to the high, wind-scoured cliffs of Qumran. Here, the landscape is stripped of the chaos of conquest, replaced by a profound, arid silence. The researchers move slowly across the scree, their boots crunching against limestone fragments that have not shifted in centuries.
This is a different kind of search. They are not chasing the immediate heat of a siege, but the quiet,
enduring memory preserved in these natural vaults. A lead surveyor stands at the mouth of a cave, light reflecting off the white dust of the canyon floor. He holds a laser level, the red dot dancing over the irregular rock faces. There is no urgency of discovery here, only the methodical task of cataloging every shadow, every hidden crevice. They enter the cave with lanterns held low, the beams cutting through the absolute darkness. The walls are smooth, worn by the passage of desert winds. Every movement is deliberate, a meditative rhythm that stands in sharp contrast to the violent history of the vessels they seek. They are searching for a sign, a fragment of parchment, or a hidden chamber that might bridge the gap between the ancient world and our own. In the stillness of these chambers,
the search for the Ark becomes a quiet conversation with the past, echoing against the stone walls of the desert.
The search moves back beneath the city, deep into the foundation stones of the Temple Mount. The air here is heavy, vibrating with the muffled rumble of traffic far above. Researchers work in cramped, narrow shafts, their helmets scraping against the ancient limestone ceilings. They are clearing debris from a long-forgotten tunnel system, moving tons of earth one bucket at a time. Suddenly, the progress halts. A wall of fallen masonry blocks the path, wedged tight by centuries of pressure. They switch from shovels to hand trowels, carefully prying the stones loose to avoid a collapse. It is slow, agonizing work. Every handful of dust is sifted through a fine mesh screen, searching for pottery shards or metal fragments that might signal a nearby chamber. The light from their headlamps reveals layers of history-crushed plaster, charcoal from ancient fires, and shards of worked stone. One researcher pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, and points to a gap behind the fallen masonry. A narrow, dark space extends further into the bedrock. They have found a passage that does not appear on any modern survey map. With a collective intake of breath, they begin to clear the final obstruction, inching forward into the unknown, driven by the persistent, gnawing possibility that the next turn could reveal the truth. The work beneath the city continues, yet the questions remain larger than the tunnels themselves. Why do they keep digging? The answer lies not in the value of hammered gold or the utility of a wooden box. It is the need for a tangible connection to the bedrock of human belief. These researchers are not merely archaeologists. They are witnesses seeking to close a gap of 3 millennia. One researcher holds a small, grit-covered stone fragment between his gloved fingers. He turns it against the light, observing the worn edges, the marks left by a hand that has long since turned to dust. In that silence, the search takes on a different weight. It becomes a pursuit of a shared inheritance, a desire to touch the physical reality of a narrative that shaped civilizations. The Ark is more than a missing artifact. It is a symbol of a promise made at the dawn of a nation. As long as the mystery exists, the effort to recover it persists. Humanity cannot simply let go of its history. They return to the work, trowels scraping against the bedrock, driven by the belief that the past is never truly gone as long as someone is still willing to look for it. The rhythm of the excavation is defined by the soft, persistent sound of bristles against stone. A researcher kneels in the dim light, holding a small nylon brush. He moves in slow, calculated strokes, clearing a thin layer of compressed silt from a section of jagged bedrock. Every grain of sand matters. He stops, holding his breath, as the bristles catch on a protrusion in the rock. A slight tremor in his hand threatens to dislodge a fragile, calcified layer, but he pauses, exhaling slowly to steady his grip. He switches to a finer, softer brush, working with the precision of a surgeon. The dust rises in tiny, swirling clouds, illuminated by the harsh beam of a single work lamp. There is no sound here but the rhythmic scraping and the steady pulse of his own breathing. He clears away a patch of debris, revealing the smooth, deliberate curve of an ancient floor. It is a slow, quiet battle against the erosion of time. He does not rush. He understands that recovery is a delicate, eternal effort. Each brushstroke is a dialogue with the past, a silent promise to uncover what was buried, ensuring that even if the artifact remains hidden, the act of seeking remains a testament to human memory. The work in the tunnels eventually pauses. The tools are set down. The silence returns to the earth, thicker and deeper than before. We pull back from the narrow confines of the dig, rising above the jagged, sun-baked ruins of the Levant. The landscape stretches out, a vast expanse of limestone and shadow that has held its secrets for 3,000 years. There is no trace of the Ark here. No gold glimmers in the sand. No wood remains to be found. Only the wind moves across the ridges, picking up grit and scattering it against the crumbling walls of ancient structures. It is a haunting realization. The artifact is lost to the tides of conquest and the decay of time, yet the story refuses to fade. The mystery remains embedded in the very dust that carpets the desert floor. It is a ghost in the narrative of human history, a question that continues to pull at the edges of our collective memory. The wind intensifies, carrying the sound of a distant, unseen expanse. The light wanes until the horizon is a thin, glowing line of memory. Then, the screen surrenders to the dark. The Ark may be lost, but the mystery surrounding it continues to captivate the world. The mystery is eternal, and the desert keeps its silence.